Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's another cloudy, crap day in Scotland, so I'll quickly get going with this. There's not any point talking about the weather anymore. It's just awful. Um, Obviously, you've seen. Sorry about the. I just can't get rid of this. Obviously, you've seen the video title. The where is the next generation of the governing body going to come from? Now, the reason why I thought about this, and I've never thought about this before, is that on Saturday I was in a place called Greenock, which is in Scotland, and I went to an engagement party. And when I was part of my wee witnessy world, it's an engagement party I never would have ever attended in a million years. It's because it was an engagement between two women. And one of the girls who's got engaged to her partner is called Michelle, and she is the singer in the band that I play with sometimes called Always the Way. So if you want to see what Michelle looks like, just look up Always the Way on YouTube and you'll see Michelle. And she was getting engaged. And also at the engagement do, who I haven't seen since Christmas Day, was a guy called Ian Gill, who also is in the band that I sometimes play with called Always the Way, who you can see on a YouTube channel, blah, 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 blah. Now, it's Ian who I first met in 1980 in Murrayfield, who said to me, why don't you move to Scotland and we'll form a band? And the rest isn't history. Well, it's obviously we never made it. We're still... we haven't given the day job up yet, so let's put it that way. So anyway, I met him, and he was, of course, a Jehovah's Witness. And I was just talking about the videos I do. And I said to him, I says, do you realise that the governing body that we knew are no longer with us? And he says, yeah, that's right. And all of a sudden, at that moment, it dawned on me that the governing body who are knocking around at the moment, who I've only become acquainted with in the last couple of years, due primarily to Lloyd's videos, were unknown to me when I was a witness. I was falling away, around about 1999, that was it. And that was it. I knew the governing body members at that time. I wouldn't know their faces, but I certainly knew their names. And of course, they are no longer with us, apart from one. There's only one member of the governing body that was knocking around prior to 99 that I know, and that's this guy called Gerrit Loesch. He's the only one. The rest of them, as they keep on stating, completed their earthly ministry, and now they've ascended to the heavens to take part in the spectacular slaughter. Now, I'm going to do a key year here of 1984, because it's important to me. I was in 1984, I would have been 22 years of age. And that's the very first time that I went to two different congregations in Ayr and in Rutherglen, where I first saw people who were emblem partakers. In other words, they were of this spirit anointed class. And in all four, that's a man and a woman and two men. And in all of their, on all occasions, all these people were old. They were sort of the same sort of age as the governing body members were. These guys were all, advanced in age, in their 70s and potentially in their 80s. Definitely the 70s. None of them were in the 60s. They were all in their 70s and all in the 80s, which was just how the governing body were at that time. Very similar. And as we thought that it was all going to come completed in 1984, that made sense. Their generation was finishing up. And so you could see in our minds that the governing body that we knew at that time would be the last, that the number of 144,000 had been completed, and these would be the very last governing body members. It made sense. Now, of course, we know that Armageddon did not come in the 80s or the 90s or the first 10 years of the next millennium, and we're going to be very shortly in the very last year of we're going into the 20s. So yeah, it hasn't come. But what has happened is all the governing body members that I thought and we thought would be the last governing body members have died off, bar one. Bar, that's coincidence because actually one of them was called Bar. What uncanny coincidence. So bar one but not Bar, because Bar's dead, Brother Bar's dead. Have all gone. So then of course they had to get the next generation of the governing body on board. Now I just want to go through some figures here. The only figure we don't know is when these guys got anointed. When they decided, I'm going to, I'm a bit peckish tonight, I really fancy the bread and the wine. So let's just go through the guys who are no longer with us, who I knew. Swingle, Henschel, Barry, Yaraksh, Klein, Schroeder, Sidlick, Barber and Barr. One guy I never knew called Guy Hollis Pearce, who only died around about 5 years ago. He got appointed about 1999. I don't remember this guy at all, but he's subsequently come and gone, so it's a name I don't even recognise. But all the other guys I recognise, and Loesch, I didn't really recognise his name to be honest with you, but apparently he got appointed in 94, so I should have remembered this guy, but I think around about 1994, I don't know. I don't remember him at all. So the interesting thing is, I'm going to go back to the year 1984 when I was 22, and I'm now going to do a comparison of the ages of our current governing body members, the next generation, who now control of 8 million people's beliefs and lives. Right, extraordinarily, and some of these are quite shocking to me, and I'll explain why after this. Right. Kenneth Cook, who got appointed in 2018, he's 59 now. When I was 22, he was 24. So he's 59 now. He was 24 when I was 22 in 1984. Heard, he's now 84. He was appointed in 1999. I don't remember him because I was obviously well on my way out at that point. He was 49 in 1984. Jeffrey Jackson was appointed 2005. He's now 64. He was 29 in 1984. Stephen Lett was only 35 years of age in 1984. He's now 70. Gerrit Loesch was 43 in 1984. He was appointed in 1994, only 10 years later. He's now 78. Tony Mutt-Typant Morris was appointed in 2005. He's 69, but he was only 34 years of age in 1984. Mark Sanderson, this really gets to me. He's now 54. He was appointed in 2012. In 1984, he was only 19. 19 years of age. And Splain is 75 now. He was appointed in 1999. He was 40 in 1984. Now, the reason why I mention specifically 84 is because when I was, in 1984, when I was 22, I couldn't think of any people who started taking the emblems. There's nobody in the 30s that I knew were emblem takers, or in the 40s, or in the 50s, or in the 60s. They had to be in the 70s, and that made sense with these guys being from that generation, and then all of a sudden the great crowd come into being, and you go, right, I'm a member of that great crowd. For somebody to be partaking of the emblems who was in the, I wouldn't have known anybody. And I belonged to 5 congregations and belonged to 2 or 3 different districts, or whatever it was. I can't remember anybody that we knew as things get passed on through the whole witnessy movement, that somebody say, oh, so-and-so's an emblem partaker and they're only in their 30s. What? Yeah, or so-and-so and they're only in their 40s. What? Everybody I knew that I were aware of including the governing body, apart from obviously Loesch, were in the 70s and the 80s. The fact that we've got this guy here at the moment, Sanderson, he was born 3 years after me. He's 19 in 1984. You know, what I would love to know is, when did these guys all of a sudden decide that they were memorial, they were going to, you know, they were spirit anointed? When did this happen? Surely it couldn't have been in 1984. You look at the ages, 24, 49, 29, 35, Loesch 43, well, yeah, he did, obviously he was in his 40s, Morris 34, Sanderson 19, Splain 40. I find it extraordinary that anybody at that point would then later on take the emblems. And I said this to Ian, I says, how did these guys, all of a sudden, when we always thought that the figure had been, we all thought the 144,000 figure had been reached in the 80s. And these guys surely weren't taking the emblems then, bar one. And what we heard was that, we used to say, what happens if one of the 144,000 falls away? You know, all of a sudden God's got the 144,000, right, I've got it. And then all of a sudden he falls away and he goes, shit. Oh, for Christ's sake, we've got to try and pick another one of these guys now. Like, right, him. Anoint him. Yeah, when he wakes up tomorrow, he's one of the anointed. This is getting a joke. I had 144,000, been building this number up for 2,000 years, and this guy was doing so well, and then all of a sudden, he had a crafty fag. While he was at the bookies, drinking some whiskey. Oh no, that's somebody else I'm getting confused with. You know, and if you think about it, the anointed ones who were in the 70s and the 70s, 80s, what are they good at? How would they fall away anyway? It wouldn't be, it's clearly not fornication, and they're probably not going to take up smoking or drinking at this late stage in life. So I really find, basically what I'm trying to say is, I really find it hard to believe that anybody of the remnant who were in the 70s and 80s, and this is in 1984, would fall away for the requirement then for God to select other people quite high up in the society and say, right, let's make him anointed. I struggle to find this to be the case, that they would fall away, especially when they have had this hope probably all their lives, that somehow something's going to drastically change in their life, then all of a sudden they're going to do something which would mean that they weren't of this remnant. They wouldn't have this fantastic privilege, you know, unique to only 144,000, to rule with Christ in heaven as one of his brothers. Who's going to knock back that responsibility? I find it very odd that anybody would. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So I said to Ian, I says, look Ian, I says, where do you, and we're doing this in the party when the music's playing and we're just trying to have a talk about serious matters, and I said to him, I says, where did these guys come from? I says, because obviously that generation, my generation of the governing body, were you know, advanced in age at this point. It was obvious, but it was going to be obvious that to perpetuate this myth of the faithful and discreet slave, the governing body, the remnant still being here, still dispensing food at the proper time, they would have to get some new recruits in, some new blood. And he says to me, and I have obviously it's not written down anywhere probably, and in the early stages of the internet, he did belong to one of these Jehovah's Witness forums. I think there's the only sort of thing that they had. In the early days of the internet, they had these forums up, and he belonged to, he was on this forum, this Jehovah's Witness forum, or ex-Jehovah's Witness forum. And of course, everybody had fake names, you know, so they couldn't be identified who they really were if they were still in the organisation. He wasn't this time. I think he'd got disfellowshipped, come back, reinstated, then fell away. And he was on there. I don't know what his username was. It was probably Dancing Badger or something. It's something stupid like, you go on these things, Dancing Badger. And he was talking to somebody called Crafty Fox. And then I think Dancing Badger and Crafty Fox eventually met up. saying, do you know who I am? I think I know who you are. You're in my area. And I think they may have met up for a drink. I think the Fox and the Badger may have met up at a pub called the Fox and the Badger, and that makes no sense. But anyway, that's what happened, and I believe that they met up. Now, Ian, apparently the Fox was somebody connected to a family in Glasgow who were called the Greenlees, who had quite a big connection. I think one of them may have been in. There was actually Ian. There was a Greenlees who was a governing body member. May have been related. Don't really know. Leo Greenlees. Whatever happened to him? Oh, there's another story. So anyway, I think he met up with him, and I don't know whether he gave. I don't know whether the Fox and Badger traded information at this point. But anyway, Ian says to me that apparently in Bethel's, you know, I don't know. It's just uniquely the Brooklyn Bethel. It might have been other Bethels, but round about this time, you know, I think as the original generation are dying off, Kirk McCoy, Spock, Chekhov, as those ones are going, you know, as oh dear, as they're feeling the final frontier, as they're boldly going where no man's gone before, called heaven, and as these ones are going up to heaven, obviously they're needing the next generation. Now I don't know when this happened was, and it must have been maybe in the 90s, I would have thought, because you see here, as I was on the way out, heard 1999, let 1999, and Splain 1999. That's 3 of them in 1999. So roundabout prior to that, maybe early 90s, apparently Ian says, and I can't prove this, but they approached people in the Bethels and said to them, have you considered that you may be of the anointed class? And this now makes sense. I don't doubt that this didn't happen, because this makes perfect sense. Because who in their right mind, you know, who would have been maybe in their 20s and 30s, you know, would have been thinking, you know, coming up into 1999, who were, you know, all these, you know, in the third, you know, I don't know what the average age was in 1984, 24, 49, 29, 35, 34, 1940. You know, if you then go on maybe 6 years, they're still, you know, relatively young. And apparently they were asked, have you considered that you may be of the anointed? And, you know, as you do, you know, the very same way that elders would have said, have you considered yourself, you know, you may want to pioneer? Have you considered that you may want to be a ministerial servant? Have you ever considered that you may want to be an elder? Have you ever considered that you ever want a special pioneer? Have you ever considered that you want to be in the Bethel? Have you ever considered that you're one of the anointed? It is unbelievable, you know, this progression. And of course, I can imagine a lot of people, you know, who were quite high up in the organisation, have been for years and years and years, and I've known loads of these people have been in the organisation for years and years and years, and they've never considered themselves as one of the anointed. Never, even though, you know, circuit overseers, presiding overseers, pioneered, missionary work, all those things. Because a lot of people would have thought, no, hold on a second, I've, you know, sorry, no, it's alien to me, completely alien to think that I could be ruling with Jesus Christ. No, not a chance. Now, I love my wife, I've built up my hope that I will spend everlasting life with my wife in the paradise, and maybe my children have all fell away. Maybe Jehovah would have spared them, and I will grow up with them in the paradise as well. You know, that's it. I've been thinking all my life, 30 years, 40 years since I've been brought up, you know, indoctrinated as a child, that the paradise is for me. For you to actually say to me now, oh, by the way, consider about your heavenly hope, sorry, it's not going to work for me. So I can imagine they would have had to ask a broad base of brothers in the Bethels who had years of exemplary service, and lots of them would have said, I've thought about it, and no, absolutely not. You know, not a chance. But I can imagine, which probably explains why some of the guys are in it today, I can imagine that some of the people who are now governing body members would go, oh yes brother, I can think that I may be one of the anointed. I think I may be. I've always had that thought that maybe I'm a little bit better than everybody else, you know? Funny, a humble person wouldn't think that. I've said this before about being humble. The governing body say they're humble, but a humble person would probably not think that they were one of these special dudes. But apparently, a lot of these guys did, which maybe explains a lot. It explains a lot that all of a sudden that somebody's approaching you and said, have you considered that you may be a group of this 144,000, the anointed, who are going to rule with Christ? And you say, yes, I've actually been thinking that for a while anyway. In fact, the next memorial, I'm going to tuck in to those wine and biscuits. Absolutely rampant. Send me the wine, send me the biscuits. I'm just going to get stuck in. And I can imagine that's what happened, which explains a lot. And explains the personalities. Because I'd love to know, more than anything else, with all these guys, with Cook and Hurd and Jackson, and let Morris Sanderson explain, when did these guys, and especially the youngest one, Sanderson, he was born 3 years after me, when did they start taking the emblems? I'd love to know. Unfortunately, when you look at their history, it doesn't say started taking emblems at 43. It's not there. It's not there. But let's crack on now, because obviously, whoever's round about 20 years younger than me or 30 years younger than me, this is their governing body. Over the past 20 years, apart from obviously, a couple who've fell by the wayside, this is the governing body, especially with the broadcast. These are the governing bodies who are known not only by their names, but they're known by the faces, and they now got an idea of their personalities. This is the governing body. To a lot of there are 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses now probably, this is the governing body. But of course, we all know who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, that Armageddon really isn't just round the corner. We know that this is just going to run and run and run till next, they come up with, then it'll be overlapping generations, I can imagine. That, yours is a generation that overlap the generation, that overlap the generation. I can see it coming. I can see that's going to be the only way that they can explain this whole generation nonsense. Yeah, you've heard it from me first, but I think that's going to be the explanation. The overlapping of the overlapping. And you can keep it overlapping for as long as you like. So in other words, this governing body that we all know and love at the moment, in 20 years' time, let's just do those ages again. In 20 years' time, and the reason why I use 20 years, because that's how long I've been out of all things witnessing. So, 20 years' time, let's crack on. So, Cookie is going to be 79. Hurd is going to be 104, probably dead. Jeffrey Jackson's going to be 84, might still be clinging in. Stephen Lett, 90, probably dead. Garrett Lowe, 78, he'll then be 98, definitely dead. Tony Morris, Taipan, 69, he'll be, 89, probably dead. Sanderson will only be 74, he may still be with us. Splain will then be 95, probably dead. So out of that, all we're going to have probably left is Sanderson and Cook. Sanderson will probably be at that point the longest serving governing body member, who'll only be 74 at this point. He's probably going to be the big chief. So wait till this guy starts flexing his muscles. It's going to happen. So he'll be 74 and Cookie is going to be 79. So Sanderson and Cookie, 79 and 74. They'll probably still be alive. But all the rest of them, not a chance. They would have all completed their earthly course and would have ascended up the ministry, up to heaven, waiting, hanging around, saying to Jesus and say, "Oh, Jesus, are we going to crack on a bit here? Because really, this is, I think we should have done something by now." So, the next generation, yes. So, where are the current Picards, Geordie Forges, Data, Worf, and you know, all the rest of them. You know, where are they now? Beverly Crusher, you know. You know, where is the next generation come from? Because surely all these guys now know that the jig is going to be up for their earthly ministry within the next 20 years. So right now, I can imagine that the same thing is happening now that happened 20 years ago, where they must now be trying to get new recruits and approaching brothers in the Bethel, bring them in for a special talk, and just say, your service is fantastic, brother. You've been here, you've done that, you've done this. Have you considered that you may be part of the anointed class? And some, in the mould of these other guys who have got ideas beyond their station, who aren't humble in the slightest, and slightly on the slightly mental stage, are going to say, yes, I've thought that for a long time. Thank you, brothers, because obviously if you're encouraging me to take the emblems, the next time we have the memorial, I'll become a memorial partaker. I'll be taking it, and then when you guys start dropping off, I'll become into the next governing body, because apparently it seems as though the governing body, apparently they all are the anointed, so I think this trend will continue. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the next generation of the governing body. Those recruits might be, or they're probably recruiting as we speak for Enterprise E, or probably whatever it is, and you know, they'll be beaming aboard anytime during the next 20 years to boldly go where loads of governing body members have gone before. In other words, ruling a bunch of people who believe these guys really are, you know, anointed and brothers of Christ, and will listen to any old crap that they come out with. So anyway, all I can say is make it so. Anyway, goodbye.